Hello and welcome to Buy Africa, the show where we focus on investment opportunities around the continent. I'm your host, Tshepo Modiba, and thanks for joining us. Over the last few weeks, we've been zoning around different regions. We first went East Africa, then West Africa. Tonight, we turn our focus to the north, specifically looking at the Egyptian banking sector. Joining me in studio to do just that is Langa Madonko from Africa Strategic Impact Advisors. Langa, thank you for joining us. Now, if we hone in our attention on the Egyptian economy and Egyptian markets, actually, certainly when I look at it, every time I look at it, I'm surprised just how well economically Egypt is doing.
I think Egypt is an African phenomenon as far as I'm concerned as well. I mean, we went through the whole period where there was the Arab Springs and all that drama that was happening in that particular region, and the economy remained shaken but not stirred. And a lot of the sectors still came out with experienced growth even during that particular period. Currently, Egypt still, by earnings per individual in the particular country, is Africa's largest economy, which I think says a lot about the way it's been structured and how robust it actually is, because despite the political turmoil, all the sectors have remained intact.
And to put that into a little bit more context, you're talking average GDP growth over the course of the last 5 years of over 5%.
Yes, and you would consider actually Egypt to be one of the more mature countries in Africa in terms of where they are economically, but they've managed to still sustain such high numbers, something that the more established economies of the world may not have necessarily done in the same period.
And from a banking perspective, this is perfect because we know that banks are a leverage in terms of the underlying economy. Some of the demographics, again, Egypt, you're talking 88 million population, and a fairly young population at that.
Yes, in terms of population, it's Africa's third largest, which again gives it a lot of scope for growth. Latest figures that are out are saying that roughly you are looking at about only 53 to 60% of the population already having an existing bank account, but you've got mobile penetration that's roughly around 136%, and we know the impact that mobile banking has on the African continent. So there's a lot of prospect for growth in terms of the banks and their reach to the greater part of the population.
And how has the banking sector done? We talk about the banking penetration, but broadly speaking, how is Egyptian banking? Is it in a healthy state?
Egyptian banking is in a very healthy state. I mean, during the period of the Arab Springs, it's amazing that they managed to grow about 14% year on year, and while the rest of the continent was not doing those type of numbers, despite the whole Africa Rising story, it tapered off a bit now with a little bit of concern around the political stability with the overthrow of the other president. But the numbers that they're still pushing out, for example, you've got your National Bank of Egypt that's doing about 12% year on year, and then you've got CIB, the largest private bank in the country, that's doing about 13.2%. So it continues to be a robust sector that clearly underpins the whole growth of the economy.
You touched on one bank in particular. If we start our focus in terms of the commercial international bank, certainly one of the more impressive banks, not just in Egypt, but really through the continent.
Yes, it's the largest private bank in Egypt. It was actually the first private bank.
So by private bank, we mean privately owned?
Privately owned bank.
Right.
And it's done considerably well. On the Egyptian Stock Exchange, it is the largest counter with a market cap of about $10 billion US. Comparatively, I think right now it says over 150 outlets, and it is the largest lender to commercial institutions. I think it accounts for about 40% of the corporate accounts that are held in Egypt, which is a significant portion if you compare to what other markets look like. Also, it's continuing to experience growth, and I think one of the things that I like about the Egyptian banking sector is how all the big banks have a focus and a drive towards making sure that they're able to provide services to the SME. It's actually an integral part of their strategy to be able to be a lender to the small and medium enterprises in the particular country.
Thus spurring growth for the entire economy.
Yes, because as you know, the demographic of Egypt particularly after the whole uprising, a significant portion started to shift towards the direction of being entrepreneurial. And previously as well, it was a highly entrepreneurial country. So there's always been a need to find mechanisms to stimulate, and the banks have really been aggressive. All the big banks have a product offering of one nature or another that they custom make, particularly to service the SME space.
Now, in terms of sophistication, this is actually quite a sophisticated bank with their hands in several areas. You touched on the commercial banking aspect, fairly sophisticated investment banking operation, wealth management, so really diversified banking group.
Yeah, a very diversified banking group. On the continent, their investment banking arm is one of the most successful. It plays a very significant role, particularly in the Maghreb region, and also they've extended their reach to go further than that and into other countries in Africa. For example, they have a presence in Ethiopia. They have a presence in Khartoum. And they are continuing to expand, not as aggressively as many other players, but there's a strategic approach to it in terms of how they enter into the markets via trade finance. And I think that makes sense if you take into account where the African continent is, particularly the region where they have immediate access to.
Now, again, just to touch on a return on equity of 30%, pretty decent growth. And you like the story. Does this mean that this is a bank that you like from an investment perspective?
It's one that definitely would hold in my portfolio. Out of the list of banks that we have on the continent, a sterling performer.
Now, for me, this highlights an important theme, that political risk that people would traditionally highlight doesn't necessarily filter through to the underlying businesses. I mean, if you look at the share performance of this over the last couple of years, this has been a phenomenal performer for investors.
Yeah, I think it's true that political risk plays a significant role in terms of your assessment and how you build your portfolio. But I think one of the things that people have to be cognizant of, particularly taking into account the African context, is how robust the businesses are. There's a lot of businesses that are built on the back of conflict, and therefore they build into their DNA and into their core infrastructure mechanisms to counter such events such as the political uprising. Because as a fundamental premise, with a bank like CIB, you go through the whole Arab Spring. But the question becomes, did you hedge yourself enough to make sure that you could maybe go 3, 5, 6 months with a period where you are not actively trading? Or is your portfolio so diverse that while your retail banking is taking a leg because of the political risk, your investment banking continues to generate the revenue that you require?
Okay, so just to confirm, in spite of this phenomenal performance to date, you'd still be a holder of CIB?
I'll definitely be a holder of CIB.
Okay, let's shift our attention to the actual biggest bank in Egypt, the National Bank of Egypt. Your thoughts on this business? How does it compare to CIB?
Obviously, National Bank of Egypt, another good bank, state-owned, but it's important to, if you are going to understand the dynamic of the Egyptian banking sector, to spend time analyzing the National Bank of Egypt, because actually it gave birth to CIB,
right.
One of the founding shareholders in that business. And currently it's the largest bank in Egypt, 300 odd outlets for servicing the customers. 70% of the credit cards issued in Egypt are through NBE, 40% of the debit cards. So you can see how significant their market share is. Also, one of the things that I think we need to highlight about them is, despite the fact that they have this advantage in terms of size and scale, they continue to be aggressive in terms of finding ways to be innovative and to also create a product portfolio that meets the Egyptian market's needs.
Yeah. And from I guess from a business diversification, are they as diversified as CIB?
Not as diverse, but fairly diverse. They offer enough products within their portfolio to be able to meet the general need. I think, for lack of a better term, they're a bank that we could classify as a commercial state-owned bank. They have very good fundamentals. The portfolio construction is very good. They are also supporting the SME space. They're also very good on the retail side, very strong. And also they understand the market dynamics, like I said before, and they too, despite the turmoil that continues to happen on the political front and their affiliation to whoever is the government of the day, they have managed to find a way to be distinct from the state and operate under market norms.
And profitably?
And profitably.
So wow, it's actually possible to have a state-owned business that actually is thriving and doing so quite profitably?
I think it's one of the things that we have discovered, and we're slightly shocked in the beginning, but confident that it can work everywhere.
There you go. So if we're looking at the potential for growth for this business, still as exciting as CIB?
I think it still is, because one of the things that they're able to do because of their size is that they're able then to take advantage of the numbers that are working in their favor to say come in at a lower price point on certain things, and also on the basis of being a state-owned entity, they have somewhat of a monopoly in terms of government and government-associated accounts. So that's always a good underpin for any banking institution to know that you've got public funds. It's because that's a very big account that you hold there.
Okay. So if we wrap up the discussion today, we'd say we're fairly bullish in terms of the outlook for Egyptian banking?
I think anybody who's looking at a diversified Africa portfolio needs to definitely be taking a thorough look at Egyptian banking, and needs to have a few assets in their portfolio and make sure that they understand the dynamic. In a conversation with a friend, one said, what's the impact of Islamic banking on Egypt? And Egypt, while they are an Islamic state in the fact that the majority of people subscribe to Islam, but on a commercial side, they've run most of their businesses the same way most capitalist states do. But of course, there's an emergence of the Islamic banking coming through, and that, as we have seen also here locally, can serve to have a significant benefit in terms of the amount of capital that you're able to capture from the market. So I think there's definitely future upside in the entire sector, and it's one that one should definitely take a look at.
Perfect. Let's leave the discussion there. Thank you. Thanks to my guest, Langa Madonko from Africa Strategic Impact Advisors. That's all from Buy Africa this week. Remember to follow me on Twitter, that's @Modiba_Tshepo, and send us your thoughts about the show using the hashtag BuyAfrica. From myself and the team, goodbye.